Sweet Caroline. Burr, burr, burr.
Hello. Sorry about this.
Was the game always rigged from the start?
Yeah, it basically, this is the only way to get rid of the sound. It was OBS, not just Twitch.
Oh, so you had to kill OBS?
So I do apologize. If someone can make sure to go and give a link to the people in the previous chat that we are streaming, so they know. I do apologize for that. It happens sometimes. It just happens and you go, okay. Yeah, we need to fix this. Hey, Renan, you're back now and live and unmuted. Because that solved it. I basically had to shut down OBS and restart it.
My voice! I have my voice!
Oh, good lord. Maybe I should have left them muted. Oh. Ay, caramba. It's good that the annoying thing is over.
Oh, I'm not trying hard enough, that means.
You were never annoying. Not that annoying, anyway.
I'm not trying hard enough, that means.
Ay, caramba.
Did you grow up watching The Simpsons?
Yeah, I had The Simpsons.
Okay. I gotta say, I'm pretty pleased with how the shouldery boys' center torso is coming.
That's good. I'm glad.
All this paintwork's going to get covered up. Nobody will see it, but I will know that it's there.
That's the one thing easier with Twitch, is it does come back straight on. To the same thing it was before. Sorry about that, everyone, but the only way to get rid of it was to basically turn OBS off and turn it back on. And also, by the way, that fixed the sound issues as well with the mic. So, yay! It's amazing what turning something off and on again with us. Ay, caramba. Ramol. IJ and Congo versus today's JDS Congo fighting each other. IJ and Congo's main guns maximum range. Who would win? Probably it's going to be JDS Congo. Because whilst, yes, the Congo does have good 14-inch guns, the 8 Harpoon anti-ship missiles will probably take care of the Congo quite quickly. Added that, what you can do with SM's Standard missiles and the various torpedoes she's carrying. Let alone, I'm fairly sure that yes, they have the 5-inch 54 from Otto Malera, its compact equivalent. The Otto Breda Compact, which was, of course, a very interesting weapon system, which can achieve 100 kilometers with volcano ammunition, and is fitted to quite a few vessels, and is a fairly useful system. Automalera has quite a few of these things. Automalera produces some very good ship's guns. Very, very good ship's guns. Ramol, what is your opinion on today's Tumbletone hull shape? Do you think it'll lower the ship's radar cross-section better than conventional hull shapes? Yes, it does, to an extent. And why is Tumbletone so rare to see today? Because it's kind of difficult to build with and get right, and it depends on the sea states you're looking at operating in and all sorts of things. I would say, in current terms of naval technology, it's probably more a Pacific/Mediterranean thing than maybe a South Atlantic or North Atlantic thing as a rule. But you can use it in both. It's just going to be more flexible in those areas. Seneca Nero, in that movie where Nimitz travels to Pearl Harbor 1941, in case you were the commander and a return storm didn't come, would you shoot down the aircraft or sink the Japanese carriers? Both. Yeah, nice way, I can do both. I have the weaponry to do both. I can do both. I can end the Pacific War in one battle. That's advantageous to me. I can end the Pacific War in one battle. Because if I annihilate the carrier fleet, if I annihilate the entire fleet, the Kido Butai, and everything else of it, which I can do with the strange raid capability, because let's be honest, the bombs all loaded up on the intruders will wreck most of those ships. And why could I only do one? You've just said the return storm's not coming. So I have time to do both. First of all, I take out the aircraft, and then I take out the ships. Castanea, how much would Admiralty 3 boilers reduce engine room staff on the RMS Titanic? Dramatically. Dramatically, Castanea. It's basically what I'm trying to remember, because you'd get rid of pretty much all the stokers. Pretty much all the stokers. You'd have a few of them, but not many of them. The stokers man the boilers, but you're not going to need the same number you need to man to put a shovel coal. And then the other systems, yeah, and she's going to be faster. So dramatically. Wayne's World of Science and Technology. Seriously, fits the aesthetic with 13.5-inch dual turrets instead of 11-inch. Guesstimate resides the placement. So you want to give them a 13.5-inch rather than... You want to fit them with 13.5-inch rather than 11-inch. 13.5-inch 45, so let's go for. So that does sound Cal. They are roughly 7,000 tons in standard displacement. I'd reckon for that increase, due to the way things increase, you're probably talking about something which is going up to about 9,000 tons standard displacement. Because if you think about it, they're carrying 11-inch guns, and their main belt is roughly 8 inches. So that's with 11-inch guns. You are probably going to increase the thickness of the belt as well. So you're probably you are probably looking at something going up to about 9 to 10,000 tons, from roughly 7,000 to 9 to 10,000 tons. You keep the same 6-inch guns. You probably actually, with an increase, you might get a twin 6-inch gun put aft as well. So you end up with twin 6s fore and aft, super firing, and 6 single 6s again, on a revised design probably. Which is going to give you an interesting capability. It is. you probably want to increase the number of 3-inch guns for AA armament, i.e. 12-pounders, but they're 3-inch guns, so yeah. They'd be interesting ships. Runon, what are the panel members' favourite naval memes, images or otherwise? I think this should be saved for next week because the panel's now just you and me, Runon.
Yeah.
So it's basically it's a question for you almost, asking yourself a question.
I mean, a little bit of introspection is always good, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but that's almost narcissistic when you're on a panel like this and it's just the two of us. Seneca Nero, what was the thing that got you the punishment of just being thrown overboard at some point in the Navy? Well, that's different from keel hauling.
Officially or unofficially?
Unofficially, you can, any time the ship stopped, you can be chucked overboard for being annoying. But usually, that you have to do something pretty annoying to get chucked into the sea. They don't usually do that sort of thing. They keel haul. Like, keel hauling people is one thing. Just chucking them randomly into the sea, it's a waste of material. It's a waste of human. It's it's easier to yeah.
What if the sailor in question is a waste of human?
Then it's a waste of food to feed them. Wayne's World of Science and Technology. What capabilities would you add to VLS systems and why? What capabilities would I like to add them? I'd like to add a way to rearm them, as said, at sea. Honestly, I have been toying with the idea of you have them in blocks of 8 already. I've been tempted to sort of suggest that we have a system whereby they're almost on off-track system, that they can be rolled in and rolled out of the ship as a block of 8 rolled inside the ship, where they can be rearmed somewhere internally, where you have the things fitted up internally to rearm them. You do need to find some way of reloading them. I think probably it's going to be an internal reload because missiles are just so expensive. If you consider, let's go with the Asta add the Asta. We're talking about something which is roughly 1.7 million for the old Asta 15s to possibly as much as 3.5 million. It is interesting that they're buying the Sea Viper system all included, including the missiles. Estimated the cost for a Type 45 destroyer is around about 180 million. Now, the thing is, if you produce more, it does make them cheaper. It does make them cheaper because, you get production costs, so it does make them cheaper. Even Sea Sparrow, Enhanced Evolved Sea Sparrow is, though, $1.8 million. The Asta in various versions, its cheapest Asta 30, its cheapest version is roughly $2 million. All these things sort of add up. So if you have 8 of them together, you're talking $16 million, or possibly, depending on the variant, you could be talking £18 million for the most expensive ones, for 8 of them. Add in a VLS launcher, which will cost its own money. And this is why when we're talking about, people talk about moving them across from ship to ship, individually those things are sufficiently expensive and sufficiently fragile and sufficiently difficult to produce. You can't afford for them to get damaged. You can't afford for your £2 million missile to swinging between ships to get scuffed And then you should not have a working 2 million missile, because in a nice way, it's going to be difficult to bloom and replace, and you've just wasted a lot of time and effort. So this is where we get into the complication of how you manage these missiles and what you do. So what I would like to see is I'd like to see a system. I'd like to see some thought put into, and I think you're going to have to be how you design the ships. I think it's going to be a case of we are either going to have to bring back swing arm launchers and magazines, because we can reload magazines far easier than we can VLS, because of the way you can structure the missiles coming in. You can bring the missiles across individually, because if you're doing VLS, they're gonna come in sets, and that's even more problematic. And you're gonna, you need to do a lot of work around these things to get it to work properly. But as I was talking about, I think the other night, you could do a system whereby, for me, the future of missiles probably involves a lot of 3D printing, whereby you have things like the warhead, guidance system, engine, fuel, come in their components, and the body and everything gets assembled, gets created from 3D printed on site, and everything gets assembled on a ship, and then it gets loaded in. And I think you could set up a system like that quite efficiently on a ship. It's how we used to actually run missiles. And you could do by doing it that way, you can make it very efficient to move the things across. You can put them in the size of packing cases, which are safe and easy to move across and easy to maneuver around, and easy to protect. And you can build it, assemble it on ship, and load it onto the system. And basically, if you are assembling them on ship and you have them on, let's say, a pre-built sort of rack system, which takes them in and tries them out, you can stick on little rails and things that will take it out to the VLS and load it into VLS without you needing cranes and things swinging around, which makes it a lot easier to do in rough weathers and difficult weathers. Or you can go the easy route and you can have a swing arm launcher and a magazine inside the ship, and then you can probably do that. You save your VLS for when you need it.
Speaking as someone who has been able to do the self-guided tour on, was it Salt Lake up in Buffalo?
Yeah, that's a lovely thing to see.
If you are near Buffalo, go take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
There is a reason that structure dominates the back half of the ship.
Yeah. It basically has a missile fabrication plant in its back. But it makes sense. Because the problem is, once you've got the missile, the difficulty is transporting the missile once it's combined into a missile. The components are easy to transport. Bob the Bomb. Viability of adapting hostile fire indicator as a passive means of detecting and queuing anti-FPV drone defenses. That's pretty much what we've been doing for ages on various systems. The good example I tend to give is reactive armor plate. Reactive armor. That's basically queued entirely by the weapon systems coming in. The seeker systems of the weapons coming in. And the sense of them. Paul Amos, thank you for this. Leslie's statement. A British F-35B jet, fighter jet embarked on the Prince of Wales has apparently had to do an emergency landing in Japan. Yeah, this doesn't surprise me much. It's one of the things when you only have one deck and you need to keep it going. But there's also the fact that, honestly, the British F-35 fleet is not as big as people would like to make out sometimes. And you need to do a lot of practice on a carrier to make things work on a carrier. And I realise there has been some interesting conversations recently. Some very interesting conversations online from people who've basically gone, oh, this deployment on carriers is a waste of time, you don't need to do it, it takes away from proper training. The amount of issues we've had with operating the F-35Bs from the carriers suggests to me we need to do a lot more training on the carrier operation. But this is also one of the problems you have with shared fleet, when it's not being, I would say, managed as well as previous fleets have been done, because it's being overstretched by the various requirements on it. You need more aircraft. You need, it's one of those things. We are ruining the problems we have created for ourselves. These are rods we've created for our own back, and the fleet. The F-35B suffers, but in regards, it's actually the British procurement system which has created this mess. Hey Andy, there is a way of getting questions in. As you're late, but it's an interesting it's a sort of well-meaning question. I'm sure one of the mods will copy the question into the queue and it will come up in time, and I'll get to it. They're usually the mods are usually pretty nice, and I can see the nicest and friendliest of the mods. Paul is still in the chat, wandering around. So, yeah. Stafford, given that World War II Lakers are starting to be decommissioned, now what Commonwealth ships could have been saved if they were given to Canada as museum ships and possible sold today? Honestly, Canada's unlikely to take other nations' ships to preserve as museum ships.
Canada sometimes in its history hasn't been able to preserve its own active ships.
Yeah, so this is the thing. It would be nice to say that Canada could have preserved ships, but they wouldn't. This is the thing. The ships they preserved are Haida, Sackville. They've got a few other little ships wandering around, but honestly, they've preserved about the maximum they can preserve, and I would argue that Haida and Sackville are much more products of not the Canadian government, but the local people who supported them and who maintained them. The Royal Canadian Reserve definitely deserves a lot of praise for it. The Canadian Navy up in Halifax definitely does a lot with Sackville, but I would say, whilst certainly Parks Canada is involved in Haida today and does a very good job, I would say that for much of their period, their survival was not down to the efforts or support of the government, because they just weren't interested as a government. Black Horse, what was the weirdest anti-submarine weapon that actually worked? Okay, I'm sorry, but the answer has to be 3 naked Canadians jumping onto the submarine.
Yeah, but that's
pistols.
Not really an anti-submarine weapon. That's just a
they're naval
war crime.
It is a mobile war crime, but let's be honest, they are naval personnel. They're armed with pistols, and they literally board the ship by going down the ladder, and basically the Germans were looking up and going, "I can't shoot at that. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look. No." And then they've got 3 naked Canadians in front of them. So, and the question is, what was the weirdest anti-submarine weapon that actually worked? So 3 naked Canadians.
I feel like that's a tactic, not a weapon. Especially as how the British strategy for winning the last, 5 or 6 major conflicts it's been involved in is call the Canadians.
Look, it in the nicest way, we can do a vote. Do we consider the fully naked Canadian a weapon deployed by the British? Or do we consider it just a Canadian tactic? There is a vote. So I'm going to start the poll.
There's also a poll in my Twitch chat if you want.
There you go. Poll started.
So if you were on Twitch, click over to my chat and you can vote in that poll.
Don't we have a combined Twitch?
I don't know if it shows up on your Twitch or not.
It's supposed to be combined.
Polls may still be siloed. They may not be shared. I didn't see an option to share it.
Okay. It seems to be you could be winning your side of the argument, Runon. It seems to be standard Canadian boarding tactics versus a British weapon. Malaga, did someone order them to board the submarine naked? No. They were just relaxing in changing sleep. They heard the order summons, they saw the submarine, and they just jumped. Okay, so while we're waiting for the vote to come in, Andy Shepard, just watched the 76mm video. If the First Sea Lord got a Type 31 or the Italian patrol ship for the Royal Navy, I would try and get the Type 31. But honestly, because the Type 31 better suits the Royal Navy's needs in terms of what it needs to do, etc., and how it needs to patrol around the world. The Italian patrol vessel, the Dira, is also quite a large patrol vessel, but it's very suited for what the Italians need. But I would, as said, if I'd been buying the Type 31, they'd have ended up with three Otto Malera 76mm. They wouldn't have had 40mm, 57mm. They'd have had Otto 76, Otto 76, Otto 76. They might have had two different types, but I'd have tried to go for the same type. I'd have tried to go for three of the same type. Super Rapide, and I'd have got Volcano, and then I'd have had an absolutely excellent flak frigate, which would have been a case of, okay, so who wants to feel a lot of 3-inch shells heading towards them? If I could have still got away with getting the pair of 40mm, I would have as well, because I'd have had them as waist mounted sort of positions, so that I've got a 40mm cover each side. Then they've got 3 76mm on the centre line, a 40mm on each wing. I'm well covered in that scenario. Wayne's World of Science and Technology. What stone frigate is furthest from navigable waters? Ours is HMCS Non-Such in Emmington. The British stone frigates are mostly quite close to the sea. So yeah, it's a hard discussion because technically HMS President is probably the furthest technically from the sea, but that depends on if you count it from the coast or from the Thames Barrier. Because technically, it's a tidal estuary beyond the Thames Barrier, and it's a river after the Thames Barrier. So, yeah.
So, according to chat, and for once chat is correct, so pat yourself on the back, it is a tactic, not a weapon.
I still maintain it's a weapon. Because it's deployed by the Brits. It's the Canadians are deployed by the Brits. Although the number of videos which are coming out of going of World War III, what did the Europeans do? Ask the Brits to call the Canadians, and then then Germany's really thankful. This time they're on their side. Yes, you always want the Canadians on your side. You don't want them thinking about what to do to you.
They call the Canadians and the Gurkhas.
Yeah, that was the thing. Is a lot of people forget about the British. They try to forget about the British calling the Gurkhas. The Canadians are scary enough. The Gurkhas, add them both together, and the whole idea of joint Canadian Gurkha units attacking you are that's just not that fair.
I'm still deeply concerned that the Canadians decided that they needed to enhance the Gurkhas by introducing them to bagpipes.
To be fair, the Gurkhas have got to bagpipes through many ways. Stafford Thompson, given recent mega projects video, is the railgun now officially dead, or are some navies still entertaining the concept? Well, I've already discussed this earlier, but the Japanese are far ahead and moving on very quickly with it. The Japanese railgun project is pretty darn decent. They've been doing a lot of firing, a lot of testing. They're slowly building up to something which is going to be viable for modern operations. I think the fact is that they are working. The Japanese ATLA have now combined with the Franco-German St. Louis Institute of St. Louis research project, and there's also rumor that they're going to combine with the British as well. And this is producing a railgun which is designed in many ways for AA work, and I have heard rumours about Otto getting involved, so the Italians. So it could well be BAE and the Italians get involved, as well as the British, French, Italian and German governments with a Japanese project. And it's at that point it's probably going to be producing something interesting. If I bring up a picture from a recent article, and there are some really interesting programs going on. Lots of people talking it through. I would my view is that the Japanese have actually got to the thing of they're testing it on ships, they're firing it from ships, and they've been doing this quite regularly. They're now doing full stripped down field maintenance on the ships. So this is the that's the sort of the thing you've got going on. If I bring up
Duck paint, really good metallic paint, but all the metal flake clumps at the bottom if they sit around too long. Well, that's the thing, LV. The problem is the bleeding edge has now gotten so expensive.
There you go.
Especially relative to
this is
company,
here you go. This is the railgun system, and I've got some pictures up of it. This is I've gone from to TWZ, which is sometimes interesting, but they do tend to produce quite good. Get the stuff quite good pictures, and you can see it being maintained. That's its normal form. It's an interesting system. It's a capable system, and yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you see something quite soon. I really wouldn't be.
Things have gotten so expensive relative to what countries want to pay that you're seeing a lot more of these joint development programs.
Yeah, and also, as I pointed out before, it's the number of ships you're going to buy. And that's the thing, realistically, that's driven up the cost of these things. Because if you were buying what you're prepared to spend on a class of 6 ships versus a class of 12 ships. You know, that's the thing. As I talked about with the Type 45s earlier, they are not £1 billion destroyers. It's just the research cost once you spread it over only 6 ships and makes them £1 billion units. But if you built the full 12, you'd probably be talking maximum 8.4, probably closer to 7.2, 7.5 billion for 12 versus 6 billion for 6. Because the research costs, right, but also there's the actual building the components of ships, because if you're ordering 12 sets of missiles and 12 sets of all these things, it all creates, how do I put this politely? You're ordering, instead of you ordering 200 and let's be honest, 288 missiles. You're ordering you are ordering 600 odd missiles. And suddenly that spreads out the cost. So that supplies the cost over 600 missiles. You're buying that many. You're buying, all these things spread out, and it lowers the per unit cost across everything, which is why you get the money going down.
Why the Zumwalts were so expensive, because they were originally planning to build 20 out of them.
32.
Then Congress started squawking about how much it cost, because DOD leadership decided to plunk the railgun project in there.
Yeah.
So they cut the numbers. Then they cut the railgun. Then they tacked the AGS on there. Then they cut the numbers again, and then started squawking when the AGS system was going to cost almost $1 million a shell.
Because they were only buying 3 sets, so they were spreading it. The reason it was costing $1 million per shell is because the research costs were spread over per shell. And then what they didn't realize was they already paid for the research and development.
Yeah, exactly, LV. It is because legislatures or the purse is so concerned about the big number that they see and not what they're actually getting for that number, they are not getting economies of scale.
Yeah, it is. It's entirely the economies of scale issue. And that's the reason. It's also, this is the point I make about commissioning putting ships into ordinary. It used to be normal for ships to spend a third to half their life in ordinary rather than in commission. And that was considered perfectly normal. If you think about Britain and the current issues we are having with availability of our destroyers and availability of our escorts, if we'd had 18 Type 23s and, let's say, 9 Type 45s in service at the moment, I kept them, and so you'd normally operated 6 and 12, with the normal being that 3 would not be commissioned. So they'd either be the ones in major refit, or they'd be the ones in just sitting around in ordinary, not commissioned, and they'd be technically for reservists to crew in wartime. You would suddenly have none of the issues you have in terms of availability. You'd have none of the issues you have in terms of going, do we have a ship to send? No, we have a ship to send. We have a ship available. We can put together 3 escort groups at any point. We can. We have 12 Type 23s available and 6 sitting in ordinary. Okay, so in the nicest way, we need to put together a task group of 2 Type 45s and 3 Type 23s. That's easy enough to do. Because all the ships in deep maintenance are in ordinary. All the ships which need to go into refit and major refit are in ordinary. They're not commissioned. We don't have to count them in crew numbers. And so you can keep a constant flow, and you then go, well, okay, we have reservists for this, and it makes a difference in things. It makes a difference in how you have, and that availability difference then makes a difference in terms of cost of the fleet operations overall, because you can now plan when you're very meticulously when your maintenance is going to be. So you don't get rush maintenance programs, you don't get delayed maintenance programs. You get a case of, okay, this is going to have to go into maintenance then, so we then pull this ship out of ordinary, commission that, transfer the crew across all these things, and this shit goes in. And so you don't have the scenario of what we have happened constantly in the UK of basically hurry up and do nothing. You have a case of, okay, you can plan things out. And this has been lost on modern navies. The idea of having a planned economy by having because the headline goes, these ships haven't been to sea in this long. Are they value for money? Yes, they are. They're in ordinary. They're sitting there for when we need them. That's it. That's the answer. Stop having the panic attack.
But then how else will Rand Paul be able to grandstand on the floor of the Senate?
Or anyone, the first thing they'll cut every chance it gets in cuts, they're going to, we're going to save money by cutting these ships we aren't using. We are using them. They're there for when you need them. Nice way. The biggest cost we've had in recent years in the UK in local councils, and people don't hear about this as the hidden cost, the amount of money councils have had to spend rebuilding up their dustbin lorry fleets, their rubbish collection lorry fleets. Why? Because they got rid of their reserve lorries. And then they started having to deal with the issues when there weren't lorries available. And then they tried to privatize it by having a private company provide the lorries when they were out of service. And that then got complicated because it was an insurance racket, basically, and it was a case of, and when I say insurance racket, it was a faux insurance racket because they were nominally available, but they would go first come, first service basis to lots of different councils, which meant the councils which had larger fleets, which often had vehicles out of service, would almost always be using them, whereas the councils which had smaller fleets and maybe didn't always have one out of service would suddenly be going, when they need one, wouldn't get one. And then, of course, you have problems, because if you don't have the rubbish collected, you don't have to do rapid collections on other days, you have to do pay overtime. It gets very expensive very quickly. And so you end up having to rebuild your fleets. And the thing is, governments have skated around with, because of wars of choice, etc. theory and all these other things, without doing this to their naval fleets, and they're now starting to find issues. And it's the same with tanks, it's the same with all sorts of things. Spares are useful. Especially spares of items which you cannot rapidly produce. I usually make I usually say, Olivia, that alliances are insurance. Armies, navies, air forces, they are like your emergency services. Your navy, especially if you're Britain, is constantly on patrol. It's your police. They're constantly out patrolling the international waters. They're constantly in those areas. They are a constant presence around the world. The police have value in deterrence. The Air Force is like the ambulance service. They're always rushing to things. They need to be on. They're either doing nothing or they're rushing to something. It's either high intensity or nothing going on. The army is like the fire service. It's a load of people hanging around with trucks doing practices and playing with lots of hoses. And that's me being slightly sarcastic, believe it or not. In normal. But when you need them, you need all those people turning up at a place to fight a fire. You need them turning up en masse to deal with the fire. You need model trucks. You need the whole force. So that's the thing. You have the alliances or the insurance for when situations get beyond what you capacity here. But your armed forces are like your emergency services. And the question is, do you cut the police because, you haven't seen them patrolling your very rich network area lately, because that makes because you don't need them in your rich area because you haven't had any problems. Yes. So you no longer have police in the poor area. And then you go, hang on, why have you now suddenly got problems in the rich area? Well, there you go, you cut the police. To save money. Saved you a little bit of money, it's costing you more in other ways.
But Dr. Clarke, don't you know that we must be fiscally responsible and return as much money to the taxpayers as possible?
Can we save the Stafford Thompson question for when Fox and Dragon are back? So can that be saved for next week by someone? And how do you convince Congress it's best if your amphibious warfare ship is doing disaster relief because there's not a war? Disaster relief is a great way to practice for war for amphibious warfare ships and all these things, because it allows them to deal with a random situation which you cannot predict, you cannot war game in advance. And so you can test how well you can deal with these situations. And basically, it's pretty much an amphibious operation is an amphibious operation when we're talking about disaster relief. It's not too different. Hello. Well, the reason for Switzerland, yes, it would be the Air Force is closer to the police, but in the UK, probably the Navy, which is patrolling around all sorts of places in the world and being a presence all around the world, is more like the police for the UK perspective. It depends on your national perspective which one fits in with which service. If you're a nation which has a lot of which has borders which need to be regularly secured by the army, then the army are probably your police. Cynic, was there ever a naval battle where one ship did a solo of a fleet of other ships without assistance from other ships? Okay, so you're going to want to look up a very interesting battle. You are probably talking about the Battle of Ely in the First Balkan War. It's sometimes called the Battle of Dardanelles by the Ottoman side. And go and look up what Pavlos Kunturutis did in the Georgios Avrov. Oh, yeah. Just go look it up. It's a whole thing. It's a battle which really shouldn't happen. There's also, I would say, an honorary mention in that discussion also has to be Africa at the Battle of Trafalgar, but we'll leave that to one side. Wayne's World of Science and Technology. Statement actually. These streams are thought-provoking. Great work, Bill. Okay. Thank you. Jakub Venak. Does upgrading old Soviet-era ships make sense for Russian Navy, like Udaloy, Kirov, Kuznetsov, and Slava? No, they're starting to get too old. Their hulls are far too old. Their engines... You'd basically be rebuilding the ship, and it's cheaper to build a new one. But honestly, the trouble for the Russians is that they have the infrastructure to build the equivalent ships. And they do, but they going to need to work on it. AC-75, what were the most consequential weather or storm or anticyclone systems in naval history? I would say probably we're talking about the storm which wiped out the Mongol fleet headed for Japan. That was a pretty big important one. What do you think, Runon? And I do not know why. There is still fluff coming out of these headphones. How does it all get in there?
Yeah. Mongol attempted, the attempted invasion of Japan. Yeah, I'd say that probably had the most notable impact. Sorry, I ADHD'd away for a minute.
That's fine. But that's the point, LAV. You do keep these things around for when you need them, and when you need them, you really, really frigging need them. They're not, they are things which you cannot, in a nice way, you cannot get a warship by just going, warship please, warship please. That doesn't work. I'd like a warship. That'll be 3 years. If you've got a design ready to go and you've got the other production lines already in process.
10 years later.
If you haven't, as Runon just said, 10 years. Stafford Thompson, following up on the wine and cheese stores, what's more devastating area to hit on a Royal Navy ship? The engine room, the medical bay, or the bar, rum store? The engine room, the ship is going to be in trouble. The medical bay, they have other facilities they can deploy you to. But it's probably going to be traumatic for the ship. I can think of quicker ways of losing a war than knocking out a ship's rum store. I really can think of quicker ways of losing a war. Less painful ways as well. Wayne's World of Science Technology.
Just imagine.
Yes?
Not only what the Royal Navy crews would do to you, but what the U.S. Marine Corps would do to you if it came out that you explicitly targeted the bar/pub on the QEs and just with intent to destroy it.
It's painful. Wayne, Canada has 3 naval-rated yards, with a SIL 1 getting naval rating and expansion, just down the road from HMS Haida. I think that there's a slight difference in sort of British and British Canadian policy in that all the British yards, to an extent, can do naval work. To an extent. There are some yacht yards which can't, but it's like one of those yards I was counting was Falmouth, because they do all the RFAs and they do quite a lot of the OPV work for the Royal Navy. A lot of the maintenance, a lot of refitting, and they have other things there which they could do for them. So I would consider a naval yard. It's a fun one as well. Add parameter. IGN decides not to build the Yamatos, but goes with carriers instead and some smaller battleships instead. How would that look? Switching Shikako and Yamato cost displacement approach crossing? You could probably get a couple of carriers and a couple of decent 35,000 ton battleships quite easily for the difficulty of building the Yamatos. You have to remember, they drain everything. There are cruisers, there's all sorts of things which aren't built and are paused because of them. You might even get some of the big super cruisers they are planning if you're not building Yamatos. They take that much resource to get them working. Seno Canero, in nicest way, that is phraseology I do not understand. I'm not down with the kids. I'm sorry, I'm a uni lecturer. There's a certain level at which we just we hear things, we're not quite sure of them, we just don't engage with it, because we aren't we teach the 18-year-olds.
Oh,
we don't
God.
have to hang out.
Seneca, why?
Now, the person who tries to be down with the kids here might understand this. LFE. Gideon, how many modern ships did you visit? Which ones would you say were the highlights of Ravel, or which ones left impression and why? As long as you talk about it. How many modern ships? Between occasionally wandering around my dad, the joy of being a King's College London PhD student and getting invited on everything which basically came to... We'd always got into the things of, whoa, we've been... PhD students have been invited from King's. I'll volunteer to go. We need a PhD student. We need someone to lead this trip for King's because none of the staff want to go. I'll go. And various other things I've ended up doing over my years in Sonora. I've been on a rather large number of ships. I would say the highlight for me, though, of all the ships I've been on was the Amerigo Vespucci, which is definitely not a modern ship. It's the Italian Navy's, the Marina Militare's sail training ship. And the reason I'd say that's a highlight is because that has probably had the best food of any ship I have ever been on in my entire life. I kid you not. The menu was... It put the hotel... It had come in and it was where it was. It put the hotels and fancy restaurants around where it was to shame. What they were offering and what that thing could produce was... Whew, I don't think what Seneca wrote is offensive, but I have no idea what it means.
It caused me psychic damage.
There are 5 questions left in the queue. What's the time? We usually
4.5 hours.
4.5 hours. I think we'll open up some questions and see if it works. See if the bot will reconnect.
All right. Now, chat, remember that for some reason YouTube is very high latency lately. So it may take a minute for YouTube to catch up. Wait until you see the system message in YouTube chat before you start flooding chat with questions.
Yes, wait for the YouTube to catch up. Okay? Wait for YouTube to catch up. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't work, we'll have to go with Paul Bot instead of Powder Monkey. Sorry,
Paul Bot is best bot. I will hear no complaints against Paul Bot.
Paul Bot is a very good bot, yes. Black Horse, I haven't even seen it turn up in chat yet, so I don't think it's working yet, but... yeah, I think it is working. It is working at some point.
All right, there it goes. I just woke up now.
It's now live, yes.
Sometimes you just gotta smack it upside the head.
Dwayne Twapp, during the 2000s, BAE Systems proposed a 6.1-inch gun for the Type 45. Would this be worth looking at again, maybe for future Type 83? Could you also get the 3-inch on the Type 45 hangar? Yes and yes. Basically, yeah. I argued for the 6-inch gun. I argued for the 3-inch gun. I argued that the Type 45... And I was very young at this point. I was very, very young, and I was the person I was arguing with mostly on this was my dad. My dad, who was also making arguments at various points from in various positions. Right? Yeah, but I argued that they should have the 6-inch gun and they should have had the 3-inch gun, the Super Rapides. And I always, to my mind, it always seemed sensible to me that they ended up with a 96 cell VLS system forward made up of 64 and 32 Mark 41 VLS and 64 silver, because that's faster. A 32 silver aft, a 6-inch gun forward, a 3-inch gun, a 76mm forward mounted above the VLS. So sort of back and above the VLS, before in front of the superstructure, and another 76mm mounted on top of the hangar, and have the phalanx either side, because then you'd have had some multiplicity of coverage. And probably another 32 cell for air defense missiles back aft as well, probably before the hangar, sort of in the superstructure before the hangar. That was never gone through. But that would have given us a ship with 128 VLS cells, which would have been useful, as well as space for 16 naval strike missiles is what I would have wanted. But again. What can I say? It was a different time. And if I'd really had my way, it would have been 3 76mm guns and 3 phalanx. With the 3 76mm, 2 76mm aft on the wing, on the corners of the hangar, and the phalanx mounted above them, and a 2-wing phalanx forward and a 76mm gun forward on the front. So you get a sort of overlapping triangle scenario with your air defense coverage. As well as all those missiles. So, but again, also I'd have built 12 of them. What countries had the capability to build useful warships in 1910, and how about 1935? Oh, any country can build a useful warship in 1910 that has a yard and is willing to put in the money. And it's the same in 1935 if they have a yard and are willing to put in money, because they can usually build destroyers, and destroyers are going to be useful ships. So are sloops. If you're talking about a major warship, well, that's a far more limited list. But the thing is, if you consider the size of destroyers in this period, we're talking less than 2,000 tons, and same with sloops. You can build a useful one in most most nations with yards can build something. Jonathan Moon, in a fully functional, freshly commissioned but uncrewed first rate from Nelson's era, so it isn't commissioned, it's in ordinary. If it's uncrewed, it's in ordinary. magically pops up in the midway of Chatham, would it be put to use or put in a museum? Put in a museum. It's a first rate. You put in a museum. It will probably, in nicest way, I would doubt it would get a long way from Chatham. I am fairly certain the Chatham Museum would grab that thing so hard it would be beyond belief. They would construct a new dock for it if they haven't got a spare space for it. Stafford Thompson, given the territory that are assumed to be handed back to Russia, how quickly could they rebuild their fleet once their authority over crime... revamp the shipyards and stuff. Honestly, I presume this is... Okay, this is a Ukraine question, I'm going to guess, and it's... Sorry, Stafford, but you could have worded it a bit more better, because this is a bit confusing in the wording. I presume it's, it's how quickly, if Russia gets Crimea and the war is over, how quickly can they rebuild their ship? It's going to take decades. There is a lot of infrastructure which needs to be rebuilt, and for the Russians, it's the whole root and branch of everything. So a lot of work needs to be done. A lot of work. Knight 6831. Why couldn't Scharnhorst use her ECM suites to jam British radars in the fight with Admiral Fraser? Honestly, because I think they were damaged quite early on. I think that was the 6-inch fire. And this is part of the problem with people talking about 6-inch guns versus battleships and all these things. You go, okay, can they kill it? No. Can they mission kill it? Yeah. Because radars and antennae are quite exposed systems. Jonathan Moon, again, that's not the phrasing for that time.
Oh, I'm muted.
I
was saying that
they'd be launched in ordinary, not commissioned in. Commissioned in the age of sail means the ship is fully crewed and is off to sea. A ship in ordinary is what you're describing, and actually, when they're launched, they usually when they're launched and they are made ready, they're usually put into ordinary, not into commission. They're only put into commission straight off the wall.
With the Scharnhorst question, the Brits also did have very competent optical range finding apparatus as well. So,
also the radars were pretty powerful for their time.
And the biggest advantage with radar is, one, it is largely speaking weather agnostic, and two, it's instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas optical, A, you need a relatively clear day, and B, it takes fiddling.
Wayne's World of Science and Technology. So, USN becomes aware of Japanese attack plans. Okay. And general idea of date. Gets 2 carriers plus escorts and 4 stands of escorts. I'm presuming that's my task force sitting outside of Pearl Harbor. You hear Pearl has been hit. Outcome? I'm launching strikes in the direction of where the Japanese aircraft came from.
Where was that question coming from?
Black Horse, when is the next World of Warships Armchair Admirals? I'd have to go into a different part of my Discord to go find out. But there is supposed to be one coming at some point. I think there is supposed to be one in August. I think so. It's an enjoyable thing to do, and I have fun because you might have noticed what I've started doing recently when I end Twitch streams. If I've been doing a normal not one just on my own, not with Runon or anyone else there, and I've just been sort of doing, I now go and deposit people into people playing World of Warships or people from the World of Warships sphere who I know play World of Warships regularly, and just drop them in, and it's apparently causing fun and confusion. But I'm really getting fed up with this camera. really getting fed up with this camera. There you go. Oh, a nicest way. If you want to be very poor financially, just try and move house. Oh, it's expensive. And everyone knows that. Black Horse, what museums or ships in the US do you most want to visit? Pretty much any aircraft carrier. Because we have none preserved in the UK, and I haven't been around a preserved carrier in ever. Every time I've seen them whenever I've been travelling and I've been near them, I've basically waved at them as I've gone past because of work. That's been my life many times. This is one of the reasons why I love the ship-shaped trips. Why I love doing these stuff with you all, because I want to start doing trips for the channel alone, but I just need to get to the point at which it can financially support such trips. Because I actually get to go see these things rather than when I'm going out on consultancy work or when I'm doing work trips for other reasons, and I just see the things and go, I'd like to go on you, but by the time I'm out of meetings, you'll be closed. Hence, there are a lot of pictures of me a lot of pictures in the family has, my mum especially has on her wheel of pictures of places her son's been, of me standing outside railings next to or various viewpoints with ships in the background going on a selfie. You know, it was the camera sort of like there on my phone going take a selfie, and me doing this, and you know the ship in the background over my shoulder, because that's the closest I could get to them. So my mum has a Rolodex of those photos of me doing that. She also has a Rolodex of my sister. My sister does the same thing with, but she can usually get them of sea defences. As in, my sister, as I've talked about before, is a geotechnical civil engineer. She specialises in stabilisation and basically stopping sea erosion of large land masses and coastal erosion. And so whenever she travels, she goes and sees the coastal defences and goes look at the big groins and things they build and those things, and has a lot of fun with them. But she can scramble over hers. Mine are usually behind several layers of security.
I'd like to go see Intrepid again now that I know more. And legalities permitting, at some point I would like to see Texas.
Gasnet, how effective were timberclads in 1861-65? Well, it's better than having nothing, but it's better than having nothing. You take a lot of damage. You create a lot of splinters, but, it's better than having nothing. And even Warrior has timber backing she has teak backing up her armor because of the need to stop spooling from the iron. So, yeah. At Paramenta, in Naval Rank series, are you going to do the Belgian Naval Ranks? Yes, I'm going to get on the Belgian Navy. As I said, that's going to be a series which I can just return to time and time again for just something to fill in, basically a day, and just give you all a bit of interest.
Jonathan Moon, theoretically, yes, but then there's the small matter of commode access. So...
Staff Johnson, how many lessons or impressions can we learn if one ship of each class was saved from the Cold War era for the youth of today to study the progression of technology war? It would be very, very interesting. If you could save one of each class going back to the beginning of the Cold War, that's still around, you'd have a very interesting museum, and it would give you a very interesting detail of how ships develop over time. As in how many lessons can be learned, it's basically infinite, because as I've talked about before with ship design, one of the things that causes the most trouble is the amount of stuff which isn't written down. So here's the question for you. What is the usual space? And when I say this, so in some when you're talking about locker design for naval ships, you have to get a phrase of the usual space. We only know how big those lockers and cubbies were because some ships survived with them. It's not written down anywhere. Then there's the usual amount of rope. Provision must be made for the usual amount of rope. Now, you will find figures for that now in books, etc., but that's because historians have gone away and done a lot of research to find out what the usual amount of rope means. And even now, technically the figures you're reading are not figures from official documents because they never wrote it down because they didn't need to, because everyone knew what the usual amount of rope was. They've calculated it from the rope being delivered to a ship and presumed that that must be the usual amount of rope. It's just, yeah, this is what we do. This is why I do a lot of what's called forensic engineering, and why I have the qualifications and skills I do in the engineering side. Because I have to go and read plans, I have to go read a lot of documents, read a lot of things which are in engineering technicalese, sometimes in different languages, and work out the history from there, because it's not written down in anywhere it should be. Because it doesn't need to be written down, because they knew what they were talking about. Poemus, what is the Royal Navy's review regarding how many ships in order today, and what are they doing, if anything, to explain by HM Majesty's government? Honestly, I think they're too bunkered down to think about it, and HM government, Her Majesty's government are not in the scenario where they're going to... Look at a big fuss over the Type 45s at the moment, when we all know why it's happened. We all know that they kept having, because of crisis after crisis, they kept pushing and pushing and pushing their refits, and now we've got a whole lot in refit at the same time, and some which we honestly can't use until they've gone through their refit because we pushed it so far. And everyone knows how you could have solved it, but no one's turned around to the government and gone, well, you know, if your predecessors had actually built the 9 they were supposed to, we wouldn't be in this situation. What is the oddest gun loadout of a modern ship you have seen? Honestly, the most unusual we're looking at is probably the Type 31s. They are flak frigates, as I've said before, but they've got 57mm and 240mm as their individual guns. You know, 3 of them in a line. You sit there and go... It makes sense, yes, but it's also this is a primary frigate. It's going to be your general purpose presence frigate. It's going to be your flak frigate in your task forces, etc. You need something sort of heavier. Frogs 1515. How do you think Admiral Tip Merrill would have fared in the early Solomon's cruiser battles with his Clevelands and Arleigh Burke with his destroyers? Thanks. Probably done better. Probably done better. The early Solomon's battles... especially if he is combined with Burke commanding his destroyers... he probably does a bit better, because, how do I put this politely? He's a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more thoughtful in certain scenarios. Yeah. If you consider when he's taking part in the Bourneville campaign, Battle of Guadalcanal, Battle of Empress Augusta Bay... Augusta Bay, I think I've done a video about. I seem to remember I've done a video or something about Augusta Bay, and he and Burke do a pretty good are constantly manoeuvring. He doesn't do the thing of hanging around, staying still, or not zigzagging. So that's part of his advantage. He's later in the war, but also he is more that type. And I think the trouble is, for some of the admirals earlier in the war, they haven't yet shifted into war mode. And there's a scenario I give is people go, well, of course they're not zigzagging, because they don't realise the Japanese torpedoes can do the range they do, because their intelligence reports have presumed they can't. And you go, yeah. But The Royal Navy knows the German torpedoes can't do the range of the Long Lance. They know it because of the intelligence they have. They're still zigzagging. Why? Because they're worried about submarines with torpedoes. They just zigzag because that's how you stop a long-range torpedo shot. It doesn't make you invulnerable to a torpedo shot. It just means you have to get closer to do it. And that getting closer is what can give you away and allow you to engage and kill them. So you stop a destroyer or a cruiser being able to do a long-range torpedo shot by zigzagging. You throw their aim off enough, they have to get closer to get it. They can still get the kill, they just have to get closer to get it. And that gives you a chance to spot them and engage them. Yeah, we're not even getting into the RFA. Again, there's the Royal Fleet Auxiliary is a classic example of you should have ships in ordinary. You should have a full structure around it. But also, the Royal Fleet Auxiliary is a classic example of you need to pay, if you're going to use civilian mariners, you need to pay them better. And you need to compete properly in the open market. And you need to actually support that civilian industry. And I know quite a lot of people who've worked in the RFA, and it's a good life, but it is also a hard life. And yeah, ships in ordinary makes sense. Black Horse, what do you think if there was a possibility of US Hornet being able to be saved and brought back from Santa Cruz? If there was a possibility of US Hornet being able to be saved, there is a slim chance, but it's a very difficult one. And if you do bring her back, that's useful. You have another carrier later on, but she won't be there she'll be out of the war for at least 18 months to 2 years. We're getting rebuilt. Probably. Stafford Thompson, the odds of now his Can Mark II. Let me get through Japan first. Honestly, Stafford, I love the enthusiasm, but let me get through Japan first. If I survive Japan and I manage to... I'm having fun with the museums. I'm having fun with all these things and the fundraising and everything going into it. And it's all been delayed and everything's been a bit of a... and we'll see what we can get done. Let me get through Japan first. And then we'll see. I want it to go well. I've also got. I keep emailing museums and sorting them out and trying to sort everything out and make sure everyone's on board. And it's very difficult when you're communicating and how do I put this? So far, the places we've gone have been similar enough to systems we're used to in their approach to things that we've had a fairly good idea of what we're doing going in and who we're communicating with. Japan is the first time I've been really worried. Are we communicating with the right people? Are we agreeing with the right people? Are we sorting this out? So I'm really worried about that going to Japan. And I've told the colleagues this, we've got the agreements and all these things, but it's the case of, it's also I'm slightly paranoid because of what happened in Scandinavia last time. We had issues in Scandinavia. We had issues where we had agreements from organizations, but sometimes it turned out they didn't have those organizations didn't have the power to give us the agreement they thought they did. I'm phrasing it that way very carefully, and so then we had other issues. It was fun. Yeah, that's about it. Yes?
What, food bowl?
Oh, food bowl, okay. I think he ate most of it.
Well, he's been screaming the whole time I've been trying to do the drawings.
I'm sorry, sis. He had eaten most of it, though.
I've just sent you a copy.
Okay. You're not happy about something?
No.
Black Horse, what do you think led to the use of Kamikaze World War II? I'm saying a scare tactic. Resource management and accuracy. It's a way of getting a guaranteed hit. You know, it's what you do. What is your idea of Sal's... Castellano, what is your opinion of Sal's idea of pre-stocking a marine support ship during hurricane season for disaster relief? It would make sense. It's useful.
But it makes sense, but it's not going to happen anytime in the next 4 years.
It would require a level of organization and preparation beyond, you know... In a nicer way, it'd be more likely to happen if... let's see... It would be more likely to happen if Waffle House had one. If Waffle House start buying old LHDs as part of their disaster preparation stuff, then it's more likely to happen than the current approach of most governments. Because most governments, that's a whole argument over whose budget would be responsible for that ship, who would be doing this, who would be doing that, and yeah.
Yeah, it's... By your use of the term marina, I assume you're talking U.S. I have not seen Sal's video. That would require both an administration and a Congress who are willing to spend pennies now to save pounds in the future, or just spend money at all. That is not currently the leadership we have in Washington.
Mm-hmm. It's not currently the leadership anyone has anywhere in the world.
Yeah, but given that the current leadership has cut FEMA, cut a lot of the disaster relief budgets,
They're
and
even less
disaster
likely to,
mitigation and prevention budgets, this one is particularly bad.
Black Horse,
On that
do you think
count.
there should have been more war crimes trial like occurred in Nuremberg in the Pacific War in Japan specifically?
There was.
There were war crime trials in Japan. I think you have a limitation in that, to an extent, the problem you have with Japan is that enough of the senior people who were being responsible were already dead, and some of them made sure they were dead before they could be captured. And therefore it's not as high profile, but also there were differences enough in the approach of how you go about it that they don't have the same profile as the Nuremberg ones. LEV, the Japanese are also working on 2 big BMD ships. Does the panel think it's likely we could see those beyond with railguns? Yeah, it's getting likely. The Japanese are working... Those 2 big BMD ships might be more than 2. They usually do a class of 2, but they're talking about that there is a good conversation of... They usually work in 2s, but they usually do a pair... they usually do a pair of pairs as their approach to things. So that's probably what they end up doing.
Stafford, that's just wrong. I'm sorry. You're misinformed.
Yeah, Stafford, you have
you're just flat misinformed on that
that one's... yeah, I'm not getting into this particular area of politics, but I would say in the UK we've been having interesting discussions with people attacking RNLI. The thing is, the RNLI is a voluntary organisation, and it's structured to save lives of people at sea. If you're in a sinking vessel at sea, they don't ask questions about nationality or anything else, they just come save you. That's what they are. They're a voluntary charity. And so that's what they do. Anything else is a national position, is a government position. That's a voluntary charity. People attacking that over saving people in sinking boats at sea. You might not like the people coming across the channel. I would prefer I always prefer people to do legal immigration methods than illegal immigration methods because because that sort of makes more sense to me and allows you to it's a security thing for me. It's a case of I don't like unchecked routes because of people who might come with them. That's the people I worry about, the security threats who might use that back door. But the thing is, that doesn't mean you start attacking the RNLI. You solve the problem. You don't attack the RNLI. They're doing their job. And FEMA are about disaster relief. They don't ask questions in a disaster. They just help people. The fact that the communities who often suffer the most in disasters usually tend to be the communities which are in the cheapest area of housing and have the lowest incomes, tend to be the ones who are worst affected in disasters. There's a correlation there, but it's not really FEMA's fault. How often did ships from the same navy run into each other in and out of war times? They were often saying hello. They were often there's a whole protocols for it because they say often who salutes who first and how they do it. No, I don't think Karen will ever be joining me on many of the trips. Mainly because in her view, she'd prefer to go on her own trips to do her own things. And Alex Compan, changes to world history if the ICN had acoustic homing on its long-lance torpedoes coming World War II. The US Navy loses a lot more ships a lot more quickly. In fact, the US Navy is actually in trouble. Long-lance torpedoes with acoustic homing, that's going to be dangerous for them to try and fight. Yeah, I don't understand. I have to say that the reason I made the thing on the RNLI is I do not understand the people who are attacking them over it. I go, they are a volunteer charity which is there to save life of people at sea who are drowning, and ships who go down. That's what they do. They're doing that. They're not there to take a political stance. They just go to save lives. That is it. That's their job. I would say if you're going to be mad with anyone, the people you should be mad about the Channel boat situation and the boats coming across from the Channel are the French authorities because they're leaving France. They're leaving French beaches. So all the boats, everything's being procured in France and then they're coming across to the UK. I would argue that the issue is that these things need to be stopped before they reach the Channel. But of course France has their own issues with immigration at the moment, and their government is very happy to see the back of a political problem for them. And that's the trouble. Immigration at this current point is a political hot potato across Europe. Well, that's sort of the problem, Paul. There's lots of, blockade of northern France is not really practical, and not really sensible in terms of the issues and disruptions it would cause. But also, there is the problem that technically, and it's not just it's morally the right thing to do, but it's also legally the required thing to do. That if a warship or a patrol ship or any ship sees a sinking craft, they go to rescue the survivors. And once you're aboard a ship which is technically the sovereign territory of a certain nation, you can start trying to claim asylum and things. So I knew it was a tongue-in-cheek comment, but people have actually been making it, so I used that tongue-in-cheek comment to make a point of it. And that's the issue. So the immigrants are more successful than Napoleon. They are, LEV. They are far more successful than Napoleon.
And Germany.
Yeah. They are far more successful. Anyway, we have now been going for
5 hours and a bit.
Yeah. I think we've gone through all the questions. Sorry about having to restart towards the end, but it stopped the thing doing its around, and I'm going to have to go and have a long talk with the sound alert system in Twitch and rejig it.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm?
So we have.
Yeah. Because we started at 7:30, roughly. Which is... So, yeah, we've been going a little over about 5 hours. Which is normal, I think, for this of a Bruships.
Yeah, usually 5-6 hours is what we've been averaging out at.
Hmm. I do wish, and this is going to sound strange, is sometimes someone will go, is there any data? This is a question I've just received, and I can understand the comment. But the comment is literally, are there any data on the cost of these musicians, and how, say, 120 of these compared to a Tamiya or a KM Sam? And that's for the Autolus Malera 76, 72. And the strong temptation is always to respond when it's a question like that is, you can just Google these things. I realize,
to be fair, I
realize the argument against is that if I might know data which you don't, but again, data for the cost of munitions, etc., does tend to be Googleable. And I like getting the comments, but it's just a case of when I'm sort of going, so that's a... As a commenter comes in, I'm sat there going, so what's the answer you're looking for from me? Is it a simple cost question? In which case, the temptation for me will be to say, Google it, because I have time constraints as well, as talking about earlier. Or is it you want me to answer the question of whether the equivalent financial expenditure is better in one or the other? And the answer is going to be, what do you want to do with it? What do you want to take out? And, what do you want to use in these systems? Because if you consider the Tamiya, they cost roughly $50,000 per missile for the Tamiya, and it's part of the Iron Dome system. It's a pretty successful system. But the thing is, as part of Iron Dome, the whole point is it's supposed to take things out. It's supposed to take out some things which are going to, take out systems to stop damage. One of the problems people often misunderstand with things is they put the cost of the missile versus the cost of the interceptor versus the cost of the missile it's attacking, it's intercepting. So you're going, well, using a $50,000 missile to intercept a $500 rocket is stupid. And to an extent, you are right. But also to an extent, if that $500 rocket would have caused £1 million worth of damage, but the $50,000 missile will guarantee that $500 rocket doesn't get anywhere near to cause that damage, suddenly that $50,000 missile makes a lot of sense. So the cost of the weapon you're using to deal with a problem is not proportional to the cost of the threat you're intercepting. It's proportional to the cost of the damage that threat would cause. Okay? It's the first thing. So again, I would say love to use a gun for that. And, use an Autolus 76. That's going to be cheaper. But the thing is, will that have slippage compared to the missile system? That's what you have to ask.
The published costs are usually accurate to what the various accounts are being billed for that system.
Kastner, I would, on our published cost front, one of the things I would say, and this is the thing, especially with the Western ones, they usually are fairly honest with the costs, and there is a reason for this. Because the costs will lead to more digging than anything else. If you want to hide other things, you make the costs truthful. Because the only thing, and the thing that especially the politicians, are most likely to check is going to be the cost of something. So if you want to hide other capabilities, You tend to hide things in plain sight. That means you want to mix truth with, let's say, perspectives on the truth. So cost is an easy thing to keep at the right amount. But you also have to remember the cost of a unit, when it's being ordered, includes the cost of research spread over that unit. The research cost spread over that unit, per unit. And also a profit margin for the defense company. So the cost to build something, the cost to build a unit is part of the price. Then there's, and that, the research cost that's spread over these units. And then there's the profit margin for the company. And over a certain time, of course, the research money is not paying for research into this system anymore. It's paying for its successor system. So, yeah, there is an argument within the true cost. But the thing is, if you keep costs fairly accurate, then usually the politicians don't dig any deeper. And the Royal Navy's been operating on that for quite a long time. It's worked out quite well for the Royal Navy, I have to admit. It has led to some interesting questions about why building in certain yards was so much cheaper than building in other yards. And the question the Royal Navy would often put is, why is it cheaper to build in a naval-owned yard, or a Royal Dock yard, than built in a commercial yard? We aren't charging for that profit margin. We are charging for the development and research, though. No. The problem, including myself, Paul, the problem is people, including myself, don't always ask questions in an appropriate way to receive the answer they were looking for. I suppose.
And, well, also part of my argument or reasoning for why I hate the just Google it answer is either I want somebody's influence on the answer. In other words, like the context or opinion editorial that goes along with the answer when I ask somebody, or I don't know how to evaluate the information, or I don't want to have to take the time to wade through 80 pages of information when I can just ask somebody who works with it on a daily and will know it instinctively.
I understand that on a certain level, but sometimes it's a case of the questions. I'm never quite. As I said, it's part of me is I'm not quite sure what they're looking for when they're phrased that way, and I'm only picking on this comment because it's literally the latest one that's come in, and I'm not sure what to do, how to answer it, because it's literally listed as cost of munitions versus this. And it's a case of, well, okay, but what do you want to do with it? Is always the question, I said. It's, those are probably the questions which cause me the most trouble, because if I go in and give a whole discussion about it, then that could be more than they wanted to know, and then that tends to lead to interesting results. And then, of course, there's the fact that there was the case where I responded to a question which was we discussed last week, and ended up getting what I would consider not the most polite response. And it carried on from there. And so it's more a thing of, okay, so if you want a pure data and just the data, that seems to me fairer to go look up things like NavWeps and sites like that, which are literally data sites, and they are very good data sites, and that's why I recommend them. If you want analysis, then it's almost the thing of put in the question that it is the analysis you want. Is my advice, because again, it's something I try and teach my students when I teach them. Is two things. I can only mark what's on the paper when they write it. I can't mark what's in their head. I can only mark what they put on paper. And if you're asking a question, make sure think about ask the question. Think about what's the answer you want in terms of what information you want the answer to cover. before you ask the question. Approach it from the information you want perspective rather than the question you're asking perspective. And you usually find your questions will be better that way. Does that make sense? Sorry, I think the old person on this call is currently having issues.
Yes, well, I sat cross-legged for apparently what was 90 seconds too long, and now I am paying for it in my thigh and ankle.
Gus, I'm glad you are not grading me on my spelling. I'm dyslexic. My spelling can be great, but I do sit. I sit there most these days. I tend to, with spelling and spell checks, I go, as long as it's especially at university level, I go English. It should be UK English, but in the nicest way. If your spell checks managed to be set to US English and you've gone through and it's consistent the whole way through as US English, then I will tend to just put a note of going, okay. But as I said, yeah, in a nice way, no markers can only mark what's on the paper. It's not us being cruel. I have had that conversation with students before. We've gone, but I know this because I've spoken to you about it. And I go, no, because this is the point. I haven't spoken to maybe these other students about it, and they might know it in their head as well. And do I presume they know it in their head when it's on their paper? No, I can't, because I can't know what's in your head. I have to to be fair to everyone, I have to mark what's on the paper in front of me. And if you haven't written it down in the paper in front of me, I can't give you credit for it. Because that's unfair to everyone else.
Remember, kiddos, if you didn't write it down, it never happened.
That'd be sort of that. Then that's, if I start giving you credit for stuff you haven't written on the paper, that's favoritism on my part. Besides which, I would like to point out, in most UK systems, in most universities, we have a class mark, so we can give them there's 10% for their grade, for their attendance, and how they involve themselves in the class. So that's where that sort of knowledge comes in. That's that 10%. The remaining 50% is coursework, 40% is exam, is the normal thing, and yeah, that's the two pieces of coursework make up the different papers make up the coursework for most of the courses I've taught on, and then there's an exam, and that counts for 40%. Each of the courseworks account for 25%, and then you've got 10% for your class attendance. So it all evens out. Thomas, one of the principal audits is I can't audit what is not evidenced. Yeah. It's that simple. It sometimes feels bad because you're reading a paper and you're reading it and you're going, I know this student, I know they know this, but they have gone off and they're answering completely the wrong question. They've gone off completely off topic. And you're just going, oh, great. They've completely gone off on one and they are talking about, this usually happens in exams more than in coursework, because in coursework, they usually come and chat to you a bit about their really cool idea for their coursework, and you look at them and go, that is really cool.
Not the answer to the question I'm looking for, but
no, it's not. It's not a case of it's asking just go. So how are you making that relevant to the topic? Is the question you ask. Because if they have a way of making, if it's relevant to the topic and they've got a way to make, then that's great. If they haven't figured out how to make it relevant to the topic, so they can't argue it's relevant to the topic, so they've gone off on one, then there's trouble. And that's why you was asking the question of, so how's that relevant to the topic? And that gets them thinking. So they can either leave it in or they can change it. You don't ever tell them it's going to be wrong. You're not supposed to give them that level of guidance. But in the exam, under pressure of the exam, they read a question and they read what they want in the question, and they completely misinterpret the question. And then you're sitting there going, oh. And to be fair, it's interesting. Most of my reports, when I've had student reports and summaries, and we tend to have evaluations by our students, most of the reports usually come through that I'm a tough but fair marker. I'll give you latitude. As long as you can give a good argument, I will give you the marks. But if you can't give a good logical argument that follows itself and it just keeps jumping all over the place, then you won't get the marks. That's what I tend to seem to be marking along the lines of. Anyway. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Hope you enjoyed. But yeah. Data on cost of munitions. Thank you, Runon. Thank you, Dragon and Foxo, for being here earlier. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Paul for doing all the work he's done with the when the bot's not filled in. And thank you, everyone else, for being here and chatting away. And thank you for all your support, for liking, sharing, subscribing, helping the channel grow. And by the way, I'm not sure if this happens when I say it live, but when I say the word subscribing, does the button start flashing? The subscribe button. When I say the subscribe, does the subscribe button start flashing? Because it's supposed to be. According to YouTube system, it's supposed to be flashing you if I say subscribe. I'm not sure. Like, share, subscribe.
Subscribe.
I'm not quite sure if it works.
Oh yeah, somebody had asked, and I'll get into your chat, but somebody I think on Thursday had asked about the links to myself and Dragon, Foxo, and I think Fleet as well.
Yeah.
I need to look at what that. I think it's just shout out.
I know. Thank you very much, Aaron. Take care, and yeah, be interesting to hear about the subscribers and not whether it's subscribed. It's probably only for people who haven't subscribed. Anyway, yeah, there's a shout out in the chat that should be coming up.
Yes, no, maybe, clans. Ah, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm. The bot just could be taking its time to work.
Yeah, it's the latency issue, and I also put the wrong command in. So.
Well, we'll just chat away for it. Well, Alex, go on. Not a subscriber. It did not blink. Oh, that's annoying. Yeah, well. They keep saying... It may have to fully ingest the video first. They'll get there eventually. They'll get there. The bot is dead. No, the bot shouldn't be dead. The bot should be, broadly speaking, still alive. Broadly speaking, he says still alive.
For some reason, there's a lot of latency now on the YouTube side of things. Although apparently StreamerBot has released to beta its 1.0 version. Mm-hmm. And apparently they're using a different lever or something of the YouTube API.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Which is more efficient with regards to API calls.
That'd be useful.
So it will be interesting to see how that impacts the duration, because so far one of the biggest users of the bot, because the man's got something like 2,000 to 5,000 viewers on YouTube, has been on vacation for the last 2 weeks or so.
Yay.
So that's why we've had leftover API for us
Can
plebs.
Someone please send this person on holiday when it's the Historiathon?
Good luck with that, fam. Yeah, there it goes. Yeah, no idea what the latency lag is about, but that's what we've got, for better or worse.
Ooh.
And for people who might be wondering what I was working on during the stream, I've been working on the new Saturnine Dreadnought. Because instead of developing a book addiction, I developed a plastic crack addiction.
Yeah.
One
Yeah,
benefit to
Catherine,
moving to the UK.
the boss is slow, but it has been beating the Minecraft server lately. That is true. That is true. We'll get there at some point. Although
Hey,
the
like I
thing is,
said,
when Runon does get money and does move to the UK, we can expect that we will lose all contact with her because she will go to a certain very special place in the UK where Warhammer comes from, and we'll never see her again. She'll just be one of the people,
okay.
one of the creatures which lives in Warhammer.
War Games Workshop has done something that, as somebody who has been in the job market, I hate. They set up their application process to send us an essay of why we should hire you.
Yes.
I hate that. Hate that with a passion.
The fact that you know this worries me.
Because they had industrial electrician positions open. Okay. And the weird thing about industrial is that it's sufficiently
universal,
standardized. Yeah, it's sufficiently universal that the transition for me to go from a U.S. electrician to a UK industrial electrician is not as steep as going from a U.S. service electrician to a UK service electrician.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at that and I bounced right off that because, one, I hate selling myself to begin with. I'm not good at it and I hate it. And two, ew.
Yeah, but basically they're expecting you to write about how much you love Warhammer.
So the LV, the bot actually does not interface with OBS at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, it can, but Dr. Clarke has not renewed the interlinks between StreamerBot and OBS, which is why he has to manually change out the questions banner.
No, I have renewed the interlinks. They are supposed to work. It's just OBS doesn't like to work. OBS doesn't like to connect with anything at the moment. OBS, when it's running Restream, doesn't like to connect with anything, and I do have to change from Restream, but yeah.
So it's Restream's fault. Okay, I see how it is. Maybe I should have a conversation with this Restream fella. Seems to be causing a lot of problems.
It does cause a lot of fun, Restream. It does cause a lot of fun. Because basically it's supposed to work in a case of that I just stream to it, and from it streams to everything else. But it just seems to add to the latency.
I mean, adding to the latency is kind of expected, I would think, but...
I don't know. Take care, on. Thank you very much for watching, and hope you enjoyed, and thank you for being here. I hope that explains stuff. Again, I want to be said in comments, and I want to be careful, because the trouble is sometimes when you've been chatting for a while, you get into a nice comfort and you say things without sort of coming across right. On the sort of that comment, it's a case of, it's when they are like that, I am not sure what they're asking for, what those comments are asking me for. If they're just wanting a cost breakdown, or if they're wanting an analysis, and I'm wanting information either way, that's the thing. It's more a case of, I'm asking it from a point of view of, I want to know what those things are looking for. Because if it is just a cost analysis, then it's almost easier for them to Google. If they want the analysis side, though, of what the arguments are for and against, then yeah. No, thank you very much, Sharon. Take care and have fun. Toodles.